Sometimes love isn't enough. As an adoptive mom, people would often say this to me, as if to imply I couldn't love my son enough to change behaviors or heal his trauma, so I should probably just give up. At least that's how I took those four powerful words, which had buried themselves deeply in my mind, leading me to doubt my ability to parent my child. Sometimes love isn't enough. That is the truth. Oftentimes you need love and powerful, personalized tools to raise a child who's experienced trauma and disrupted attachment, or a child who you're struggling to connect with. I am on a mission to help parents raising kids with a tricky past to show up with unconditional love and practical tools to lovingly manage even the most challenging of times. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, if you like what you hear, I'd love for you to leave a review. Now let's get to the good stuff. Welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I am Angie Grandt. I'm your host for this podcast. And today I want to talk a little bit more about praise. I know a couple of episodes back, we talked about how praise can really create people pleasers. But I wanted to dig a little bit more into this topic because, when I reflect back on my life, my career, and what I learned about praise, the way that I'm looking at things is just so different now. And so I really wanted to dig deep into why this topic just seems so important and so pressing to me, and something I just feel really compelled to share with you. So first, I want to talk about just my evolution of learning about praise. I've shared this before, but my career for the most part has been in the ABA world. I was very well trained in ABA, and then after several years of that, became a speech therapist. And one of the core principles in my work was using praise to increase desired responses. So, teaching a child what an expected response was, whether, like I said, in my work in the autism world or through speech therapy, but teaching kids through different prompting techniques, what was an expected response. And then when the child was close to that response or when they hit the expected response, the expectation on me was to provide praise so that they know that they got it right. And over the years and even a couple of decades of, doing that kind of work, a lot of my own evolution was really learning how to get better at giving praise, making sure that my praise was becoming not only something that was motivating to the child, but also something that gave them more specific feedback about whether or not they hit the target, essentially. That's what my training was about. And I do see value in that. So don't get me wrong in that. I'm not discrediting that per se, that model, because I do think that there's some value in helping our kids to acquire new skills, right? It is my career as a speech pathologist to help kids to learn how to more effectively communicate. But what I want to talk about today is that there's a different way to do it. And the more that I learn about development, the more that I learn about each of our kids, of your kids' unique designs, not only do I think that there's a better way, and I'll explain what I mean by that a little bit more, but I think that there's a more targeted way for your child, for each individual child, because kids are so unique. And while part of me has known that all along, right? Like, obviously, kids are so different. Every kid has such unique needs, but that wasn't the approach. That wasn't how I was trained. Although I was trained to provide goals that were specific to each individual child, essentially the approach was not necessarily based on each child's energetic needs. And I'm just looking at things so differently now that I really understand human design, or I'm beginning to understand it. Let's be honest, it is a complex system with so many nuances. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. But what I do know is as I'm watching human design play out in all of the people in my life and watching their unique energy needs, I can't help but notice how what each person needs is so incredibly different, and it's in their design. What each person in my life that I'm so close to needs, it is mapped out in their design in ways that just continue to shock me, if I'm being honest. So, I'm going to talk in this episode about communication in general, and we're going to wrap it up by talking about praise versus encouragement and really what the difference is. And I'm going to give you some key practical ways to do it because breaking the praise habit is hard. I am deep in this work that I'm doing to understand human design and how it impacts our relationships, how it impacts how each of us show up in life. I'm deep in it and I'm still finding it really hard to break the praise habit. So I'm going to first talk about just um, if you're new to human design, or even if you're not, each there are five different types, and depending on which human design path you follow, there are all kinds of different vocabulary words for it. But the most common vocabulary is kind of the traditional vocabulary, which is that there are generators, projectors, reflectors, manifestors, and manifesting generators. Those are the five types. And one thing that is um, unique to each of those types is how they feel love. So, those who are a manifester, meaning that they have some type of motor to their throat, which also means they have this internal nonverbal creative flow. Those with that internal nonverbal creative flow, they need to be informed. This is how they feel love. When they're informed and provided information, they feel love. But the rest of us, generators, projectors, and reflectors, really need to feel heard. So, just there, splitting the group of types into two kind of buckets, those manifestors and manifesting generators needing to be informed and everybody else needing to feel heard, is what helps us feel loved. But it's not that simple, right? There are also some other nuances that can help us feel loved, including there are different configurations that um, they need to feel accepted or need connection and touch, right? There are different nuances about our types that can help us feel love. But moving beyond that, right? Thinking about then what discourages our kids, right? We're first talking about how each of us feels love, and that was a very general overview. Um, there are also some nuances about like different definition that we have. So some of us need to feel trusted. Some of us need to be able to share our feelings. Some of us have to have meaning to what we're doing in order to feel love as well, which is more in depth about the definition that we have in our type. Um, but also then thinking about, so each of us have different ways that we need to feel love. And I feel like I'm kind of stumbling over my words now. So thanks for hanging here with me. But we each have different ways that we feel love. And when we feel loved, when we feel supported, when we feel connected, we are better able to engage in our family, right? Where when we think about our kids and when we're meeting our kids' energy needs to help them feel loved, not just showing up and telling them you love them, because if I'm being honest, that doesn't work for every kid. And we know that as moms, if or as parents, if you have raised more than one child, or even just one child, maybe you have that one child that telling them I love you isn't isn't having an impact on them feeling loved. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of your kids need different things from you just at that very basic level of feeling loved. I know with my two kids, both who are projectors, but both who have very different configurations and different genetics and different, the first 5 years of their life was very different, but my kids needed something very different from me to feel loved. And now that understand better, because honestly, as mom, I felt like I was kind of grasping in the dark to try and figure out how to help each of my kids feel love. But now that I know what I know and I can look at their charts and see exactly what I could do to help them feel loved, that's what I'm doing now. They're adults now, but I'm showing up for them in such a different way because I have a roadmap to help me do it. It is just wild seeing it play out in action because I'm responding to their unique energy needs, not just trying to guess or wondering what happened in their past that led to maybe my way of showing love not working for them. So, when we think about our kids feeling loved and feeling, when our kids feel loved, they're so much better able to do what they need to do in our family, right? Our kids are better able to enjoy family time. They're better able to help out to be a bigger part of the family when they feel loved. But there are many things that we can do, oftentimes in our attempt to help our kids feel loved, that can actually discourage our kids. There are five key things that we can do that actually discourage our kids, but as parents, as we're trying to grasp at straws, trying to figure out how to help our kids feel loved, these are things that as I go through this list, these are things that you've probably done before trying to help your kids feel loved. But in fact, they actually discourage our children. So let's run through that list with a few examples, and then we'll talk about how to actually encourage our kids instead of discouraging them. So, the first way that we can discourage our kids is by being too permissive, which essentially means not following through, not setting limits. You think about the like, you know, if you do that again, you're going to have, you know, X, Y, or Z consequence, but then we don't follow through. We know that that type of permissiveness can can discourage our kids from trying their best, from trying to fulfill their potential because well, why bother trying? They never really know if or when they're going to lose whatever the privilege is. We can also be overly permissive when we give in to our kids' demands or letting them be disrespectful because we haven't held a firm boundary or set limits. And I'm not saying that our kids don't need a little bit of flexibility from us, but when we're overly flexible, overly permissive, our kids don't learn where they fit in. And so then they themselves are grasping at straws, trying to figure out. And that can just be so discouraging to them and make them feel like they're not valuable enough for us to put up a boundary with them, for us to set limits with them. So that's the first one is permissiveness can be really discouraging. The second one is overdoing. So when we're doing too much for our kids, trying to solve their problems for them, we're doing things for them that they are capable of doing or capable of figuring out or have the potential to figure out. When we're overdoing for them, it can be really discouraging for our kids as well. When we're making decisions for them, when we are not giving them the freedom or the encouragement is the word that keeps popping in my head. But when we're not allowing our kids to make their own choices, not allowing them to solve their own problems, not allowing them space to try to figure it out, again, can be so discouraging for our kids and is actually giving them the message that we don't trust that they're capable. And I don't know about you, but that's not the message that I want to give to my kids. I want my kids to feel like they're so capable and that I'm here if they need me, but I don't want them to feel like I don't trust that they couldn't do it themselves. So by overdoing, being overly helpful, trying to solve problems for our kids, it can be really discouraging. So that's number two. Number three is that negative motivation. And many of us don't feel like we do this to our kids, but it's kind of easy to do actually. I know, like I said, in the way that I was so trained in my career, these are things that we were really discouraged from doing, but it can come up so easily. So, some examples of negative motivation, things that make kids feel bad about themselves, might be guilt or punishment, shame or name calling. And these can even be things such as calling our kids shy or saying that our kids aren't hard workers, or it can be saying things like labeling them as their behavior, right? Like my my child is so behavioral or so quiet or so lazy or whatever it might be. I know we always had a rule in my house about no name calling, but that doesn't mean that these things couldn't pop up. Things about maybe making our kids feel like they're less than just in the way that we talk to them. So that's the third thing that we can do that can really be discouraging to our kids. The fourth thing is demanding, which is kind of the opposite. We talked a minute ago about overdoing, but demanding too much from our kids, setting the bar too high, expecting them to be the best of the best, focusing on the things that they didn't do well, or giving them too much responsibility and not allowing them to be kids. All of these things can be really discouraging for our kids too when we think about how when we set the bar so high, but perhaps it isn't in our kids' design to meet that standard. I think about school, right? The education system. When we expect our kids to be A students or B students, and there are going to be certain topics that just might not be something that your child excels in, but we set the bar that, they get money for getting certain grades, or they get a certain type of praise from us for getting certain grades or doing so well on a test or whatever it might be, that that can really be discouraging for our kids when perhaps they're not interested in a certain topic, or they don't feel motivated to, excel in certain subjects, but they feel that pressure from parents or others to reach a certain level. And again, I'm not saying that we don't want to encourage our kids to do their best, but when we are demanding or praising them to be the best, that's different. And then the last thing that we can do to really discourage our kids is discounting them, not valuing them, not giving them the time that they really need from us, making other things more important. And I see so much evidence of this around um, every day where parents are prioritizing their cell phones over their kids. And it's easy to do, right? We feel this pressure to respond to an email, to respond to whatever it might be. Many of us are, not creating our own boundaries, and myself included. I know that this is something I think about every day, but not setting up our own boundaries to to make sure that we're creating time for family and connection and separating that from the time that we create for work and tasks that we need to do. When we're discounting our kids, not asking for their opinions, not valuing their contribution to the family, not making their feelings important or their wants important, we're really discounting our kids, which can be so discouraging. Our kids from a very, very young age, I see it happening with a toddler in our house. She has opinions already about what she would like to see happen in the family. And we don't take into account her opinions. I can see this discouragement on her face. But the same is true whether our kids are 2 or 5 or 15, that our kids have opinions. They have things to contribute to the family. And oftentimes I hear parents say, like, well, my kids don't want help or they don't have an opinion. Well, you know, perhaps they were trying when they were younger. And I'm not saying this in a way to blame parents at all. I just think we don't know. But when we see kids who have shut down, perhaps that's a signal that we need to dig a little bit deeper to really get their input and really to encourage their participation in the family. We're designed to be um, community creatures, right? We're designed to be part of a tribe. And so, really making sure that we're not discounting our kids, not valuing them, and that we're setting down our cell phones and taking time to really listen to each other is so, so key. So, right. So, enough about discouraging. Let's now talk about the difference between encouraging and praise. So, like I said early on and in a previous episode, praise is designed to um, teach our kids to appease us. It is designed to teach our kids that they did something good that makes me feel happy. But when that's what we're teaching our kids to do, to make decisions that make others happy, it often detracts away from what is internally motivating our kids. When our kids are expending so much energy trying to figure out what they need to do to make mom happy or dad happy or their coach happy or their teacher happy or keep the principal happy or their boss happy or whatever it might be, it creates this momentum of ignoring what internally makes us happy and puts this focus on that external motivation. It puts this um, judgmental, evaluative quality to what our kids are doing. It creates rivalry and competition. It really focuses on performance. And the person themselves can feel really judged. It can create competitiveness. Did I say that already? But it can really create selfishness at the expense of others. Also, as I was talking about schoolwork and things like that, praise can really create a fear of failure, a fear of letting others down. It can create this dependence on others, and it um, it can really create this sense of putting us all in a lineup of from best to worst. And I don't know about you, but that that isn't the sense that I want to create in my kids. It's not the sense that I want my grandkids to have. I really want my grandkids to feel an internal drive to do their very best and to continue to strive for personal growth in a way that isn't competitive with others, in a way that is more cooperative and in a way that helps people feel valued for who they are and not what they produce in the world, in a way that helps our kids to feel valuable just because they are, not because they achieved a certain accolade or because they got a certain grade or because they reached a certain milestone marker. I I just feel so strongly that helping to encourage our kids to be internally motivated, to be self-sufficient and not dependent on the praise or approval of others will, in the long run, really help our kids to fulfill whatever their purpose is. Because when we're so driven by what other people's opinions of us is, and many of us are so worried about what other people will think that we don't do what our gut is telling us to do. We don't listen to our own intuition about how we could help others, how we could serve others, because we're so afraid of what somebody might think. I think about when I wanted to start helping parents. I knew that I had been through an incredibly hard time as a parent. A hard time that I couldn't even really put words to, although I tried. I tried to vent to my friends about how incredibly hard it was. And I I was trying to figure out why I had gone through such an incredibly hard thing and why it was so hard for me, because I felt like I had all of the tools that I needed to be the best parent I could possibly be for my son, who himself had been through extremely hard things. I was trying to figure that out. And when I realized that the reason that I went through what I went through was so that I could help other parents do it different, when that realization came to my mind about, holy cow, I went through what I went through in the way that I went through it. I felt the awful, negative, bottom of the barrel feelings that I felt for a reason. I felt them because that's what needed to happen for me to fulfill my purpose. My purpose is to help others tap into their sensitivity to really show up for their kids who need them most. It, um, Believe it or not, it is in my design. It is in my design. My purpose is helping others to be sensitive to their own needs and sensitive to the needs of others. It's in my design. Wild, right? But when I realized that, before I even knew about human design, when I realized that my purpose was to help other parents, the first thing that popped up in my head was directly related to praise and discouragement and people pleasing. It took me over a year to get out of my own way, and I still am a little bit, but I was so worried what other people would think about who am I to help other parents when I struggled so much? Who am I to help adoptive parents of all things to do better, to connect better with their kids when I had such a hard time connecting with my son? It was the biggest pain that I have ever been through, was trying to connect with my son. And I had so much negative talk in my head about, who am I to step out, put myself out there to help parents when I didn't do it right, or so I thought. And that all of that negative talk that I had in my head was directly related to my strong drive to make sure that I was doing what others wanted me to do, or what I thought others wanted me to do. My my hesitation, my resistance to showing up for parents, you, was held back because of my own discouragement. And again, I'm not saying that, anybody in my life did anything wrong. I think that they were doing what they thought was right. But had I been raised with total encouragement, encouragement to trust myself, to trust my gut, to just step into fully being me, no matter how perfect or imperfect I am, to um, to feel that I am fully valued and valuable just because I am, and not because I've achieved a certain thing or had certain accomplishments, or um, or for any other reason, but to for me to see myself as being valuable just because I exist. If that was my sense of self 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when I had started on my path to helping parents, I I would have just jumped right into it, and it wouldn't have been so hard. But it has taken so much work and really understanding my human design, quite frankly, to really realize, oh wow, it is that encouragement versus praise and people pleasing that held me back. Who would have thought that being a people pleaser would hold me back from helping the people that I knew that I was meant here to help? But so so the point of me sharing that part of my story is that I don't want you to feel like you're doing anything wrong with your kids, but I do really want to encourage you ha ha ha, to use more encouragement and less praise. More encouragement for your child to be the fullest version of themselves and not praise to convince them that they need to keep you happy because your kid is not here. Your kid's purpose is not to make you happy. I'm not saying that your relationship with your kid isn't something that should bring you joy, right? Our kids do bring us joy, but that is not their purpose on this planet. They have their own purpose to fulfill, which is not about making you happy. And when we're praising, essentially we're teaching our kids that your job, first and foremost, is to make mom or dad happy, and then the rest of it will fall into place. But we know when we really reflect on our own lives that that thought process, that mindset of praise has created in us as parents this this conundrum of knowing that we're meant to do something bigger, but holding ourselves back because we don't want to upset anybody, right? We don't want to offend anybody. We don't want to, maybe misspeak about something that we don't really trust. So, so take that to heart. Really, I really encourage you to reflect on your own life situation. And I can't even pinpoint for myself, like, oh, my parents said this or my parents said that. That's not what it's about. But it's about really reflecting on how I look at the world and the way that I'm holding myself back. And I know it's because I have this strong drive to not upset people, not, like try to be the best because I do kind of want a little bit of praise from other people. I want other people to see value in me. But when I really step into, no, 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 Angie, you're valuable because you are you, not because you have a certain degree or you've helped a certain number of parents or you got a certain grade on an exam for crying out loud, right? Like we put so much value in those things and praise our kids for doing those things, but in the big scheme of things, that isn't who makes them who they are. So, let's talk about some really practical ways, some vocabulary shifts that you can start doing to help move yourself towards more encouragement and break that praise habit. So when we think about praise, praise is things about saying our kids are good or they're the smartest or I'm so proud of your good grades, your accomplishments, right? Or you're the best, right? You're the best helper I've ever had. You're the best um, table setter. You're the best cupcake maker. Or saying things like your paintings are so pretty. Your smile's so pretty, right? Saying things that are providing value of being the best as opposed to being the worst, right? When we're telling our kids that you're the best or I'm so proud of you, takes that value away from our kids and puts them in this lineup of the scale of one to whatever, and they fall on that scale somewhere. Versus an encouraging statement is something that we say to our kids that helps build a sense of pride within our kids. So instead saying things like, thank you for helping to set the table, or your commitment to learning is really clear. You really seem to enjoy learning, or things got done quicker when you helped. Or asking our kids, if they do a painting, instead of saying like, oh, your painting is the prettiest, to ask them, which painting do you like the best? To put it on them to decide what they like, what they see value in, instead of us giving and it's not that we're not allowed to share our opinions. That's not what it's about at all. But it's really taking note about, are we giving our opinion in a way of trying to add value to that so that they want to continue to please us? Because again, that's not well, what I'm suggesting that we build up in our kids. I'm suggesting that we build up our kids' own sense of inner value and teaching our kids that they are valuable because they exist, as opposed to praising our kids to make decisions because it will make us happier, make us more proud, make us more whatever. That's what I'm suggesting here. Um, So, some other things that we can do to encourage our kids is asking them more questions like, oh, wow, how did you do that? Things got faster because you helped out, or I appreciate, fill in the blank. Or asking our kids, how does that make you feel? Or are you proud of yourself? Um, or acknowledging that they put in effort or that they put in time to get things done. We can also, of course, share our feelings about, like, I'm so happy for you. Things that are putting the onus on our kids to make decisions that help them feel proud, help them feel confident, help them feel their sense of self-worth is a way to really encourage our kids instead of praising our kids. So I apologize that I was struggling with my words early on. I appreciate if you made it till the end. I was really trying to wrap my head around how to make this sense in a way that really makes it practical for you as you're listening. So thanks for hanging in there with me. I hope that you found value in this lesson. I would love to hear your feedback. If you're ready to connect, I am offering a free session. I have been updating my show notes a little bit as I've been evolving and changing the way that I'm serving families. So be sure to check the show notes about how to connect with me. I would love to help you really tap into your child's unique gifts and yours too, so that you can really show up so differently for your kids in a way that will help your kids and you move into the next 5, 10, 20 years in such a more connected, a more loving way, a way that helps to build your kids up and to encourage them instead of discourage them. So again, thanks for hanging out, and we will talk soon. I hope that you found this episode so incredibly powerful. Thank you for joining us for Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. If you resonated with what you heard here, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a review. You can also follow us on all the socials. Check the show notes for all the details about how to start tackling behaviors and creating a powerful, loving relationship with your child, a child who needs your love the most. And if your gut's telling you that it's time for a change now, book a free consult. I'd love to help you love unconditionally and show you that you have that power within you.